Well, they said they were on a romantic date for 50 years, Ron Reagan and Nancy Reagan. And Nancy was one of the most influential first ladies in American history. She helped her husband become president, and she stood by him with adoring glances after every speech he made. She was an amazing woman. I had the privilege of talking to her to offer my help after, one of those political events. She was quite a person, but tributes have been pouring in for Nancy Reagan, who died Sunday at the age of 94.
Well, as Pat said, Ronald and Nancy Reagan had a love affair that spanned a half a century, from Hollywood to the governorship of California to the White House. And she took care of him as he suffered from Alzheimer's. Charlene Aaron brings us this look at the life of Nancy Reagan.
Praise and respects for Nancy Reagan came from Republicans, as former California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger paid respect to the former First Lady.
She was one of the greatest First Ladies, an extraordinary human being.
And Democrats, as President Obama tweeted this photo saying, "Our former First Lady redefined the role in her time here." Nancy Reagan will be laid to rest at the Reagan Presidential Library alongside her beloved late husband. Outside the library, families are leaving flowers for one of the country's most memorable and influential First Ladies. Ronald and Nancy Reagan had a love story that spanned more than 50 years, with Nancy saying her only mission was to back her Ronnie and to strengthen his presidency. Nancy encouraged Ronald Reagan to run for the White House again in 1980, after his close loss to President Ford in 1976. He didn't want to try again, but she encouraged him, and he won in a landslide. And once they were in the White House, she kept an eye out for his best interests. She said, "I'm a woman who loves her husband, and I make no apologies for looking out for his personal and political welfare." There was also controversy when Mrs. Reagan also turned to astrology during her time in the White House, using it in the president's schedule. She told Johnny Carson on The Tonight Show in 1989 why she did it. She thought it would protect her husband after the deadly assassination attempt in 1981 that nearly took his life.
That all came out of the shooting. And you can't really describe what you go through when your husband is shot and almost dies. And most people didn't know that. There were 2 times that they came to me and said they couldn't find his pulse. He was very close to going into shock, and if he had, then that would have been it.
She said it didn't affect any major decisions. In the final words of his last big speech, Reagan called on Nancy.
"Before I go, I would like to ask the person who has made my life's journey so meaningful, someone I have been so very proud of over the years, to join me. Nancy."
After Ronald Reagan revealed in a public letter he had Alzheimer's disease in 1994, Nancy became even more the protector of his life and his legacy, calling it a, quote, long goodbye. When President Reagan died in 2004, Nancy planned his funeral. At his gravesite, this iconic image was taken of Mrs. Reagan kissing his coffin. Nancy also told ABC's Diane Sawyer something that Reverend Billy Graham told her about the promise of seeing the love of her life again in heaven.
"I just want you to tell me that when I go, that Ronnie's going to be there waiting for me." And he said, "Oh, yes, absolutely, Nancy." "You're sure?" Billy says so.
Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Well, it's bittersweet. She's a wonderful lady, and it's sweet that her life was as it was. It's bitter that she's left, but 94, she's lived a good life, and the funeral was an extraordinary experience, and her love of her husband, even after she knew he was dying of Alzheimer's and had prepared for that death for years. Nevertheless, she was still a grief-stricken widow, and the images of that will live in our memory. Well, in other news, the battle for both the Republican and Democratic presidential nominations is far from over. John Jessup has that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. Here's John.
That's right, Pat. Split decisions in both parties' primaries this past weekend. On the Republican side, Trump and Cruz winning most of the contests, and Bernie Sanders won a couple of primaries over frontrunner Hillary Clinton. Then the two Democratic candidates debated again in Michigan, and as Dale Hurd reports, some sparks were flying.
In the land of General Motors, Hillary Clinton was playing to her audience.
I voted to save the auto industry. He voted against the money that ended up saving the auto industry.
If you are talking about the Wall Street bailout, where some of your friends destroyed this economy,
you know...
Excuse me, I'm talking.
The Democratic candidates met in Flint, Michigan. Michigan holds its primary election tomorrow with 147 Democratic delegates at stake. Voting will also take place in Mississippi and for Republicans in Hawaii and Idaho. Sanders and Clinton not only attacked each other, but laid it on the Republicans for some of their mudslinging.
Compare the substance of this debate with what you saw on the Republican stage.
We are, if elected president, going to invest a lot of money into mental health. And when you watch these Republican debates, you know why.
Sanders notched wins in Nebraska and Kansas, while Clinton snagged Louisiana. On the Republican side, Super Saturday was Ted Cruz's biggest night yet. Record turnout handed him decisive wins in Kansas and Maine. Trump took Louisiana and Kentucky, but with Cruz close behind in second. That helped Cruz close the gap in delegates with Trump, and both men say they want the race now to be just between the two of them.
I want Ted one-on-one, okay?
It has to be head-to-head.
Marco Rubio had a very, very bad night, and personally, I'd call for him to drop out of the race.
Marco Rubio came back on Sunday to win Puerto Rico, and he's promising to stay in the race. Trump now has 384 delegates, and Cruz is not far behind at 300. Rubio is well back with 151, but he says he'll win his winner-take-all home state of Florida, while John Kasich says he'll win his winner-take-all home state of Ohio. So there looks to be no quick end in sight to the race for president for either party. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Pat, Dale seems right. It seems to be the never-ending campaign.
It's sadly that. I think we're all a little sick of what's going on, but nevertheless, the Republicans may get it together, and I think if it's just Cruz and Trump, they could have a substantive debate. It would be wonderful if they did. I would vote to stop all the debates and just get on with voting, but nevertheless, Michigan's coming up. Trump looks like he's way ahead in the poll in that one. Kasich is hoping to pick up a win in Michigan. He's hoping to pick up a win in Ohio. I think that's winners to take all. And then comes Florida, which again, winner take all. And we don't quite know what's happened to Rubio, but he's long faded out. Instead of, I don't know, he flamed out in that one debate, and he hasn't been able to get traction since. But it's a tough, long slog, and I think we'll all be grateful when it's over. But we still need a president, and that's what this is all about, is picking the leader of the free world. It's a big job. John.
Pat, North Korea is threatening to launch nuclear strikes against South Korea and the United States as the two countries begin large-scale joint military exercises today. Last week, Kim Jong-un ordered nuclear commanders to be ready to launch at any moment after strict UN sanctions were slapped on Pyongyang for testing ballistic missiles. North Korea often makes dire warnings when the U.S. and South practice joint military drills. As agency France Press points out, the North does have a number of small nuclear weapons, but experts don't know if it's capable of putting them on nuclear missiles. Pat, back to you.
Well, I certainly don't want to take a chance. It's terrible. You have a rogue state threatening to incinerate another state that's close by it, or to incinerate a larger nation like the United States. They're talking about millions of people, and their disregard for human life is appalling. I don't know what we can do, but it has been suggested, and I totally concur. They are a puppet of China, and China needs to put the clamp on those people. That Kim Jong-un is a crazy kid who's got no business being in charge of any country. And we could squash them like a bug, and I'm not sure that maybe the time may come where we have to, just for self-defense, because it is a very dangerous thing to have a nuclear rogue state just running loose saying we're going to put our nuclear forces on alert. I mean, it's horrible to contemplate. John?
Pat, former President Jimmy Carter says he no longer needs treatment for cancer less than 7 months after revealing he had been diagnosed with melanoma that spread to his brain. The 91-year-old Carter shared the news with one of his regular Sunday classes at Maranatha Baptist Church in his hometown of Plains, Georgia. He said he received an MRI lasting more than 2 hours in a video posted on WXIA TV, and then went on to say, and then the doctors determined that I didn't need any more treatment. Israel appears to be developing some new alliances in spite of the dangers in the Middle East. As Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem, the development could mean good news for the Jewish state.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told visiting Jewish leaders from America a dramatic shift is happening in the Middle East.
Major Arab countries are changing their view of Israel. That is, that they don't see Israel anymore as their enemy, but they see Israel as their ally, especially in the battle against militant Islam with its two fountainheads. The militant Islamists led by Iran and the militant Islamists led by Daesh.
That new relationship was evident when major Jewish leaders from America met with the presidents of Turkey and Egypt.
There's a wind of change in the region. I think there are new opportunities.
Malcolm Hoenlein led the Jewish delegation to Cairo and Ankara.
The difficulties and challenges of the region, terrorism, the ISIS threat, the role of Russia and Iran and others in the region are driving countries to reassess their relationships with Israel. And I think they've come to see that Israel has a lot to offer, whether it's the problems of water or agriculture or fighting terrorism.
Hoenlein says Arab leaders told him the West has left a leadership void in the region as Arab countries face daunting challenges.
Some of them see the absence of the West in the region and cite that, feel that there's a vacuum, and they're looking to find solutions within the region to some of these challenges, and also seeing the involvement of Russia, which different countries see in different ways, but all express concern about what will happen with Iran post the deal with the influx of $100 billion. What role will they play in destabilizing the region?
Hoenlein says in the midst of these challenges, they see Israel as an ally.
There are ways that we can be of help, and I think building relationships with Egypt, with other countries, with the Gulf, with Turkey, and helping move them in the right direction. Again, it won't be an instantaneous change. There are opportunities, though, to counter the extremist forces, because all of them see that they are endangered by it as well.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Thanks, Chris. Pat, it reminds me of the adage, the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
That's right. Well, I think without question, the Saudis are coming to believe that the Israelis are their friends. And they're threatened by Iran. And there's going to be a Shia-Sunni conflagration sooner or later, and it's going to blow up in the Middle East. And I still believe that those oil fields of Saudi Arabia will be on fire and set up probably by Shias. So the fact that they might reach out to Israel is understandable, and I have heard the back channels that the Saudis have indicated they would give assistance to the Israelis if they decided to go in and blow up some of the Iranian nuclear facilities. On the other thing, I think that Erdogan is dangerous, and I believe that to count on them would go against prophecy, which indicates that in the latter days there will be a coalition, including Turkey, that will come against Israel. But Egypt, on the other hand, el-Sisi should be regarded as a friend of the United States and a friend of Israel. And I think that the fact that we have been shunning el-Sisi in favor of the Muslim Brotherhood is one shocking failure of the Obama administration.